Україна.
Welcome to the X Global News Channel. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukrainian territory and began a special military operation. In this operation, the balance of power was not in favor of Ukraine from the very beginning. Thus, the Russian economy in 2021 in terms of gross domestic product, calculated at purchasing power parity, GDP at PPP, in current prices was 7.6 times greater than the economy of Ukraine. Russia's GDP at PPP was $4,494 billion, and Ukraine's GDP at PPP was $558 billion. Russia's population is three times larger than Ukraine's. The population of the Russian Federation in 2021, according to official data, was 143.4 million people, while in Ukraine it was 43.81 million. According to the annual bulletin The Military Balance, which is published by the International Institute for Strategic Studies, ISS, in 2021 Russia's military spending was 14.6 times higher than in Ukraine. Russia spent $62.2 billion or 3.8% of GDP in 2021, while Ukraine spent $4.27 billion or 2.4% of GDP, according to ISS estimates. The total number of military and paramilitary forces in Russia in 2021 was 1.454 million people against 298.6 in Ukraine, that is, the Russians have almost 5 times more. This is without taking into account the 34,000 people of the so-called People's Militia of the LDNR. The superiority of Russia over Ukraine in armored vehicles is 6.5 times, in artillery, mortars and MLRS-2. 6 times, in combat aircraft 9.6 times. The USA and other NATO countries supplied non-lethal equipment, armored vehicles and boats and radars in rather limited quantities until the end of 2021. Only Lithuania has been supplying Ukraine with small arms and ammunition since 2015, while the U.S. began to transfer limited quantities of FGM-148 Javelin anti-tank missile systems and other weapons since 2018. The situation began to change only in the fall of 2021, when, against the background of the concentration of Russian troops on the borders of Ukraine, larger shipments of small arms, anti-tank and anti-aircraft portable missile systems were made. Overall, however, these deliveries, on paper, did not change Russia's enormous military advantage over Ukraine. The misconception of the first days of the war, to which many Western high-ranking military officials and experts succumbed, that the AFU and other Ukrainian armed formations could hold out for a few days, weeks at most, was based on the impressive superiority of Russia's military power over Ukraine. For example, General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, told U.S. senators that Kiev could fall within 72 hours if a full-scale Russian invasion of Ukraine occurred, several congressional sources told Fox News on February 5, 2022. Nevertheless, Ukraine was able not only to withstand the first weeks of a full-scale Russian invasion, but in late March forced the Russian armed forces to begin withdrawing their forces from the Kiev region and by April 2 had completely cleared the region of occupying forces. Despite the impressive successes, without international assistance Ukraine would not have been able to withstand the Russian superiority in equipment, weapons, ammunition, and personnel in the long run. Despite all the blunders of the Russian political and military leadership, Ukraine's chances of defending its independence without external support would be minimal. From January to November 2022, according to the Kiel Institute for World Economy, Ukraine was announced international support totaling €113.11 billion or $119.07 billion and including assistance from such international institutions as the UN, the Red Cross, the IMF, the EBRD and others. With the aid of such international institutions as the UN, the Red Cross, the IMF, the EBRD and others, it is expected to total €128.99 billion, or $135.7 billion, of which €71 26 billion, or $75.02 billion was pledged to support Ukraine's economy and social sphere, and €16. 58 billion, or $17.45 billion, for humanitarian needs. The international community, mainly represented by the U.S., Britain, the British Commonwealth and the EU members that make up the NATO bloc, and took the bulk of the military commitments of €40. 97 billion or $43.13 billion. However, according to estimates by Andrei Larionov, an economist and senior fellow at the Center for Security Policy in Washington, D.C., the cost of all defense materials physically delivered to Ukraine from February 24 to December 20, 2022, was $20.5 to $21.0 billion, or €19. 47 to $19.9 billion, or 48.6% of what was promised in 2022. Since the start of the special military operation, experts estimate that Russia spends an average of $8 billion a month in budgetary and non-budgetary funds, while Ukraine, according to its Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, spends $4.4 billion a month on the war, of which about half comes from aid from allies. This is clearly insufficient given the overwhelming advantage enjoyed by the Russian Federation from the start. If Ukraine were given all the aid in full, it would be able to spend $6.7 billion a month on military needs. And this would still be 15% less than what the Russian Federation spends. That is, this would be enough to maintain defense capabilities, but not enough to achieve victory in a relatively short period of time. To do this, it is necessary to achieve an advantage in armaments, ammunition, and equipment. Such an advantage can be obtained if the Allied support reaches $16 billion per month. Thus, ideally, in 2023, Ukraine's allies' military support should be increased to $168 billion, or from $2.3 billion to $14 billion per month, i.e., a six-fold increase of the current level. There are significant problems with the supply of weapons, which the AFU needs in order to liberate the territory seized by the Russian armed forces. Of the requested supplies to the AFU that Mikhail Podolyak voiced, so far only 49% of the requests for light armored vehicles, 40% for tanks, 26.5% for artillery systems and only 16% for MLRS have been satisfied. In an interview with The Economist on December 3, 2022, Valery Zaluzny, Commander-in-Chief of the AFU, said, "I know I can defeat this enemy. But I need resources. I need 300 tanks, 600 to 700 BMPs, 500 howitzers. Then I think it's quite realistic to reach the lines on February 23. But I can't do it with 2 brigades. I get what I get, but less than I need." Politicians in the U.S. and other NATO countries justify insufficient aid to Ukraine with 2 theses: depletion of their own military reserves and unwillingness to drag the NATO bloc into a direct confrontation with Russia. Both of these theses, when examined directly, are not just unconvincing, but outright false. For the Javelins alone, the U.S. has supplied 34% and for the Stingers, 11.9% of its stockpile. In the 5% to 1% range, the U.S. supplied artillery systems, 4.5%, MLRS, 2.7% and on-air defense and missile defense systems, 2.7%. BMPs, armored personnel carriers and armored vehicles account for less than 1%, tanks, 0.7%, small arms, 0.3%, aircraft and helicopters, 0.1%. In this case the U.S. Department of Defense is cheating a little bit about tanks, aircraft and helicopters. Thus, the financing of the repair of 45 T-72B tanks from the Czech Reserve and 20 Mi-17s belonging to the former Afghan government and paid for by the United States can hardly be considered as purchases from the American arsenal proper. In any case, no depletion of the U.S. arsenal can be traced. Therefore, one should not demand too much from the armed forces of Ukraine. They are fighting above their heads, considering what a powerful enemy they are up against, which is superior to them in every way. Yes, the situation is difficult, but they are squeezing the fullest out of their capabilities and even doing beyond their real capabilities. We need to get into their position. Support them and not turn away from the Ukrainians. This is the end of our video. Choose your likes. Write your opinion in comments. Subscribers to our channel to keep track of our new videos. Thank you for your attention. See you soon.